Welcome to Leaders and Legends, the podcast focused on leadership and clinical trial execution. I'm your host, Patty Lushton, CEO of Diligent Pharma. In each episode, we'll get to know the individuals who are driving change and influencing the direction of our industry. Whether you're a seasoned executive yourself, an emerging leader, or simply passionate about clinical trials like I am, join us as we discuss our industry's most pressing challenges, the future of clinical trials, and hear insights and advice from the leaders who are moving our industry forward. Ravi, thank you so much for joining Leaders and Legends.
Pleasure to be here, Patty. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we're going to cover a lot of ground in this conversation. We're going to talk about the industry. We're going to talk about United Therapeutics, pharmacovigilance. But I kind of want to start at the beginning and sort of the early years of, your life, where you grew up, how you came to the U.S. Is that okay? Can we
Sure.
start with your origin story, so to speak?
Yeah, sure. Happy to share. So thank you for that question. So grew up with humble beginnings in west of India in a city called Ahmedabad, which is now turning into a metropolitan city, actually, which is fascinating to see after a couple of decades. Grounded in strong values. Immigrated to United States in a search of quality education, and as they call it at the time, the land of opportunity and a chance to be with the family. My mom's side of the family was migrated early on to United States, and we were very, very close growing up together with my cousins and my aunt. So I think it was an opportunity to be with the family. So I think I migrated when I was about 12 years old. Faced challenging early years while adapting to the new culture and environment, of course. The hardest part, I feel, was I understood the language, I understood the culture, but I could not communicate back effectively. But that gave me a tremendous amount of opportunity to learn and grow. Held on to an advice that I got it as I was growing up: don't let go your dreams. So stayed committed to my path, driven by perseverance and then clear sense of purpose. So that was my early childhood coming to United States.
Wow. That must have been incredibly frustrating to sort of understand what was happening and understand the language, but not feel like you could communicate, because, that's sort of your self-image and how people see you, how, the spoken word. And so do you feel like that sort of was formative in terms of, did you bring that into your adult life, your sort of professional life?
I did. And I think the way it shaped my leadership is that these challenges are not unique to me. These challenges are real, especially when we communicate across multiple different geographies. And our pharma and biotech industry is so universal. We deal with different ethnic groups, different populations. And I think that became part of my learning as well, that has to be embedded into your leadership philosophy. So answer your question, yes, I think those lessons were carried on. And even today, when I deal with organizations outside of United States, I think that is always part of that I try overwhelmingly to accommodate, knowing that there are challenges on their side. Which helps them build confidence and contribute meaningfully to the mission or the growth.
Yeah, so there's empathy and I would imagine inner strength that was built during that time. So talk about how you got into the clinical trials space and the pharmaceutical industry.
Wow, that's a loaded question. So where should I start, right? From an early age, since we talked about a little bit of a childhood, I think healthcare was always central to my life. especially growing up in a household where science was deeply valued. Um, I still remember my first encounter with molecular biology in high school, and it was fascinating to me. I spent hours and hours reading about cellular mechanisms, um, and the Krebs cycles and counting ATPs, and honestly, it became one of my favorite subjects. Um, so I think it was science was, you know, was a connecting as early as I was growing up, um, but surrounded by many PharmDs in the family, pharmacy felt like a natural career choice to me. Um, I gained initial exposure to your question, clinical trials, during my academic years. As I was doing, and I was fortunate enough to go to university who was really clinically focused. And we had clinical rounds and rotations with some leading hospitals who were conducting many clinical trials, like New York Langone University, VA hospital based out of New York as well, and Presbyterian. So I was fortunate to get that exposure through that academic career. After graduation, I prepared to pass my national board exams with high scores, and there was a confidence boost after that as well, which then led me to narrowly miss my law exam by a single point.
So in other words, a little bit of overconfidence.
That's right.
Perhaps?
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And the waiting period to take the next law exam and then continue my career gave me an opportunity to explore industry. And I think this is how I got into it. Now,
Wow.
reflecting back, I have come to see that detours and setbacks are not necessarily negative. They often illuminate paths that we might never have discovered otherwise, honestly. And that was my learning after so many years. And I think my continuation from there was landed on a first role in a pharmaceutical biotech in a company called Burlex Laboratories, a small biotech company out of Wayne, New Jersey. And my first true exposure to clinical trial came into that role, where I was immediately drawn to the work. I always enjoyed problem solving aspect of everything, and quickly started to appreciate the complexity and the constant evolution that is involved in clinical development. So that was a drawing force for me. And this early experience really sparked a lasting passion to keep learning and growing in this field. So that's my early clinical exposure and how I became passionate about clinical trials.
Yeah. Well, the idea that sort of the bump in the road or the setback could actually put you on a different trajectory that ultimately is very satisfying, rewarding, sort of shape your career path is so, it's interesting, and it's also good for people to remember, because I'm sure, I mean, everybody has had their setbacks, right? But I think sometimes, like, young people sort of getting into their careers and their professions, not finding the right job immediately, either right after college or, when they're young as professionals, it's really understandable to be completely discouraged by that.
Yeah. And honestly, I felt somewhat similar. Sorry. I did feel somewhat similar at that time. And this is why I kind of chose my words carefully, reflecting back. Because it almost felt like I am now drawn to a plan B of my career or my overall trajectory.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound or feel good initially, but it does eliminate paths that are hidden, So I was grateful for that. And, I consider setbacks as not true setbacks, but opportunity for future success.
Yeah. It's a good lesson. And, I think sometimes you have to sit in the discomfort a bit and sort of feel what that's like
Yeah,
and use it as a catalyst then
that's right.
for moving in a different direction and
Yeah,
starting to just take small steps, right, in a
absolutely.
direction that feels right.
Yeah, and I gave
Yeah.
that career advice to many students who actually come through rotations or even for career advice, because I think it is one of the most valuable lessons of my life as well, or career lessons as well, that really helped me reshape what I wanted to be actually, and I'm happier doing that.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with one of my colleagues yesterday who's on my leadership team. His wife is very athletic and she had a health scare not too long ago. And then she just recently broke her arm, right? So now she's in this situation where she can't, do sports. She doesn't have as much movement. And
Mm,
he was telling me that she had this previous experience of kind of getting into a situational depression from her health scare, and that she just did not want to go back there. And so she quickly was able to mentally and emotionally rebound to finding, like things that she could appreciate and
yeah,
looking towards things that she could do instead of what she can't do. And the mental mindset,
yeah,
it is just it's key. In some ways you
yeah,
could say it's everything, right? In
yeah,
terms of our ability to get on the right track. And so
yeah.
yeah, I love that story, Ravi.
And you can extrapolate,
Um,
as you said, Patty, too, right? Those career lessons can extrapolate into your real life, right?
oh
Because,
yes, yeah.
these kind of situations are unpredictable, and they can occur at any time in your life. And I think if you develop that strong mindset, then I think you are ready to battle any challenges that life can throw at you. So
Yeah,
definitely.
it's like working a muscle too. If
Yeah.
you sort of step into sort of courage, you
Yeah.
can call call upon that again when faced with different but similar situations. So
For sure. For sure.
um so I want to talk, I read a paper that you recently authored that was called Pharmacovigilance is at a Crossroads. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about why the requirements for drug safety and pharmacovigilance are at a crossroads.
Yeah. No, thank you for reading that paper.
It was really interesting, by the way.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. I don't, I mean, pharmacovigilance is one of my passions, and I don't know if an hour or 2 hours is enough, but I'll try to.
I know that's a
Um,
big question,
it's
actually, to
yeah,
be able to summarize a very well thought out, manuscript. But
yeah. So
yeah.
I'll give it a try, and then you tell me how I did. So uh, when I started my career in pharmacovigilance, it seemed a long, long time ago. But it was all about compliance, documentation, and reporting. Important, yes, but reactive in my perspective. And today, the role is transforming at a rapid pace.
Hmm.
So, and from a journey standpoint, I think, we as a pharmacovigilance professionals or industry used to be the compliance guardians, I would say, who are thinking about
Hmm.
tracking, documenting, making sure that everything is happening according to the rule book. Um, we ensure safety, but we weren't shaping the future.
Hmm.
Um, and the turning point is when the data started to become multifold. Um, And why do I say that is because now, as you can imagine, and I'm sure you have come across this in many readings and many different discussions, the data is everywhere, right? And if we actually narrow that down
Yes.
to safety data, clinical data, trials, healthcare records, wearables, patients
Right.
themselves, social media,
It's
data
voluminous.
exists
It's
everywhere.
everywhere and
That's exactly right.
voluminous.
And technology like AI and predictive analytics can also be a game changer, but they also bring questions about trust, biases, and accountability. So I think those are the two main turning points. What kind of shapes the new expectations that are on rise? One
Yeah.
is patients aren't silent anymore. They want answers. They want transparency. They want seat at the table. They want to be involved. They want to be the decision makers. Um, and pharmacovigilance can no longer be a back office function. We have to
Hmm.
guide benefit risk conversations and influence clinical trial designs from all the data and all the information that is being fed to us. So the crossroad moment is we can stay as a record keepers, which is not a bad thing, or we can evolve into a strategic leading discipline that supports drug development and patient trust.
Hmm.
Um, and I talked about AI a little bit, and AI is at the heart of this choice. It can help us predict risks before it occurs, but only if it is used responsibly and transparently. And this is where I feel like safety can actually help enable that trust. Um, and I think
Can,
we
can
talk
I
about, sorry, go
can
ahead.
I just ask a question about that?
Sure.
Because isn't that sort of the heart of kind of a challenge in the industry right now? Leveraging modern tech tools, leveraging AI, but in a way where there's confidence in doing so.
Yeah.
And with, pharmacovigilance, quality, compliance professionals, there is a natural conservatism, as there should be in many ways, to just, make sure you're moving forward in a way that is completely responsible and compliant. So how do we get beyond that sort of reticence, I guess, because of the concerns around AI, and leverage the tools to their fullest?
Yeah, I think the answer to this is multifactorial, Patty. And I think there is a self evolution that also needs to be part of this, where we have to think beyond our traditional roles and adapt.
Hmm.
That's number one. So number two is the regulators and other quality and compliance driven folks are very aware that if we focus too much on restricting the AI capabilities, it will limit our growth overall. So there is a lot of work in industry that is ongoing about creating guardrails that will
Hmm.
give the confidence to even allow the AI to evolve and integrate into our life and work that we do. At the same time, give us the controls and the validity that we always seek appropriate.
That makes sense. And do you think there's a role for collaboration, industry collaboration, or technology platforms that can gather information across the industry, that where AI can be leveraged in responsible ways? How do you think about collaboration as a way
Um,
to
so,
make progress?
and I think that's a really, really interesting, point that you highlight, because one of the challenges that I feel that is real with this crossroad moment is talent gaps, ethics, uneven global readiness, right? But it's also the opportunity, and the opportunity is in the collaboration, because we can't overcome all these challenges without that unified approach and the collaboration across industry and across functions and across geographies.
Yes.
So absolutely, the way you articulated the question, it's really at the heart of how we can overcome some of these challenges and gaps.
So working together could accelerate progress in that
Absolutely.
way, and
Absolutely.
in terms of overcoming the challenges. And what you described, Ravi, it can be applied also to quality and quality management as a discipline as well. Just this shift from reactive approaches to more proactive approaches. And I think one of the similarities really is this idea of taking a holistic view, working across functions, embedding processes early on. But inherent in that is the challenge of organizational silos. And can you talk a little bit about sort of this, how you think about pharmacovigilance as a discipline that spans across functions, and how do you sort of work within the constraints of silos that are just kind of, they're there in companies, particularly big companies?
Yeah. I think the education part, I think it's very, very critical to this whole framework. And I think overcoming silos is not an easy thing, especially when you have pockets of data, the pockets of information that is well controlled, well regulated. But I think if we actually think about the future, the silos have to be broken down in order for AI and data to really provide us the insights, which will drive stronger decision making. So your question is, how do you actually break silos, right? I think the breaking silos is from twofold. Number one is everybody has to be educated in terms of what the true objective of sharing information is. And I think the second component is going back to collaboration. And I give this analogy to people who work in our industry is not a single person or a single team has ever taken a product from inception to commercialization, right? It's, even though everybody has a very unique role, they all have to come together, share data in order for you to get a successful approval in commercialization, right? So your bench R&D team, whatever work that they're doing, which is very unique, they have to pass that information on to your product development groups. Your product development group has to be really, really open and honest with how the future looks like in terms of the disease and how do you actually do the trial design and what the risks are. And that's where safety comes into play. And they can say, hey, this is where the risks are, these are where the concerns are. But also at the same time, you also have to bring in your commercial colleagues into the discussion as well, because they are the one who's actually going to be able to tell you what the market looks like and what the demands are and what the real insights are needed from the data and the biostatistics and so on and so forth. And then I think your regulatory team comes into play and say, okay, if you're going to do all this, how are we going to package all this for us so we can actually communicate the story to the regulators the right way? And once all that happens, then your marketing team comes into play and say, look, now we have to package all this and give it to different, stakeholders like physicians and hospitals and patients and everybody else. So I think you know there is this underlying thesis that exist that nobody can win a game or take a product to success if you're not working in collaboration. And even though the responsibilities are so siloed, they have to integrate at some point. And if we continue to do that, I think that will be the way to overcome and continue the growth, and also integrate AI, kind of building onto that story.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just very eloquently described the end-to-end drug development process in such a great way, and it in some ways it's completely logical. But being in the industry for so many years, we both know all of the challenges, the speed bumps, the inefficiencies that are inherent in that process, partly because of silos, partly because of, of other things. And do you think it is the space in between handoffs, between the functions, between the stages of development that are what we have to, look a little bit more closely at as an industry in terms of shortening timeframes? I'm sure in your world, in your company, acceleration and timelines are extremely important, right? And I think it is across the industry as well, but particularly with rare disease populations and, certain therapeutic areas. So is that an area of focus, do you think, Ravi?
Yes, and it has been an area of focus for quite some time. And I think the industry also has recognized that, Patty. And I think sometimes what really helped, and I think we have relied on other experts, organizations who sit outside of our traditional framework of drug development and commercialization to help us bridge those gaps, or, connect the dots in a much more smooth and rapid pace. An example that comes to mind is, when we want to launch a clinical trial or find different vendors to do certain tasks that are different or unique. We need that intelligence, and that intelligence doesn't exist sometimes with us. So we have to go and get it from outside. So some of those sponsor companies or the vendor companies have very unique role in accelerating this transition to keep our urgency to timelines ready. So absolutely yes, to answer your question. And that should be one of the focus areas. How do we actually reduce that gap through those expertise that sits outside of some of these sponsor companies?
I'm going to ask a question that is just a naive question, because I've worked in the clinical trial sort of space, R&D space, for a long time, but I've not worked on the commercial side. And I'm wondering, is it now pretty kind of common practice and operationalized that commercial colleagues work very closely very early on in the development process? Or is that still, in many organizations, still siloed, where there's not enough conversation around what you described as framing the market and leveraging data to inform execution strategies?
So I think we have done better over time. There's still room to grow. And I think, in my personal opinion, I think industries are understanding the value that commercial framework, commercial organizations bring to the success of your development. but also the challenges are the commercial landscape is also evolving so rapidly. So infusing that real-time change into your long-term strategy of development, it's also an increasing challenge.
I have one more. I want to talk about United Therapeutics, but this conversation is so interesting to me. And I have one other question that kind of is aligned with maybe change management. But in your paper that I read, you pointed out, two key sort of maybe critical success factors. It wasn't worded that way in the paper, but with this whole evolution of pharmacovigilance, you described how strategic foresight and multidisciplinary expertise going hand in hand are really important. We talked about that during this conversation. Do you feel that in your area and just in general, having senior executive support, engagement, having sort of the most senior leaders involved in some of these complex initiatives that cross over functions is really core to success?
I strongly believe the answer is yes. Because I think these leaders are true influencers for a change and the value. And I think it is best for industry and industry functional leaders to engage these executives and seek their guidance and get their buy-in in order to execute these projects. So absolutely yes. And I have done that in many of my big strategic initiatives. And I think that has drawn tremendous value. And what I will say is, they also bring in an insight that sometimes is not available to the view of doers or initiators, which is also quite powerful because it really focuses you to think about areas that are not in your vision.
Yeah, it's very well said. And speaking of leaders and dynamic leaders, your CEO at United Therapeutics falls into that category. And I wonder if we could just take a few minutes to talk a little bit about United Therapeutics, the mission, your work there, and what you're excited about in what you're doing at United Therapeutics.
For sure. So United Therapeutics, from a mission standpoint, right? I think United Therapeutics is a laser-focused organization with one thing at their top priority is bringing hope to patients with rare and life-threatening diseases, especially where treatment are scarce or non-existent, right? And our mission carries a sense of urgency. I think we talked about that a little bit. And I think you figured it out just by reading some of the work that we have done because of the patients that we serve, and every day matters, right? Because these are, rare and devastating diseases that we deal with. What makes UT special is that we lean into the thoughtful challenges, or toughest challenges as well. Thoughtful and toughest challenges. We are not just developing therapies for pulmonary arterial hypertension. We are also pioneering organ manufacturing and exploring frontiers that could completely change the future of medicine. So in a few words, innovation here at UT isn't afterthought. It's a part of our DNA. And you talked about the CEO of United Therapeutics, Martine Rothblatt. She's a true inspiration to many, not only me, but many others around the world. And the mission of the company is born from her personal crusade. where, she wanted to develop a drug to, support her daughter's disease. And I think our mission is born out of that. So yeah. And what excites me about my work is, the most exciting part of my work is the direct connection to patients. And sitting on the safety side, I feel that every decision I make ultimately ties to a real person, a real family, and a real story. I get to work at the interaction of science, ethics, and also patient trust, which is actually a great trio, and most impact happens. I also enjoy being surrounded by people who are unafraid to take on the impossible, which is an incredibly energizing thing for me. And I think lastly is knowing that the work we are doing today and also what we're going to do going forward will help patients tomorrow tremendously. And that's a mission worth giving everything for.
I can't think of a better way to close this conversation. As you were talking, I had the chills, Ravi, because it is very inspiring. And, I feel that companies that are, doing the impossible, doing really difficult things could serve as a beacon, as an example for others who are striving to drive innovation within their organizations. And I really do love what you said about not losing focus on who's at the center of the work that we're all doing here, and that's the patient. So Ravi, thank you so much. I feel like I learned so much from you in this conversation. It was one of my favorite interviews, and I've been doing a lot of them.
That.
So thank you. I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you, Patty.